Picture this: a gymnasium floor in Tokyo, Japan. Tuesday evening, November 14th, 1967. The fluorescent lights hum at 60 cycles per second, casting everything in pale white light. And in the center of that floor stands a man. He weighs 450 pounds. His name is Koji Tagawa. He holds the rank of Yokozuna, the highest title in professional sumo. And he has never, not once, in 14 years of competition, been moved backward by another human being. He is standing still, and he is silent. Behind him, 37 witnesses, coaches, wrestlers, a handful of journalists who happen to be visiting the Meiji Shrine training complex that evening. They are all looking at the same thing. A man in a dark green jacket, 138 pounds, 5'7", standing 8 feet away from Tagawa with his hands loose at his sides. Nobody in the room is breathing. The 138-pound man does not move. He is not afraid. He is not bracing himself. He is simply watching. And then it happens. Tagawa moves first. What happens in the next 4 seconds will take 37 people a lifetime to explain. Some of them will spend years trying. Some of them will stop trying altogether. Not because they don't remember, but because they remember too well. This is that story. To understand what happened in that gymnasium, you have to understand what Koji Tagawa meant to Japan in 1967. Sumo wrestling in Japan is not a sport. It is a religion with a scoreboard. The Kokujikan Arena in Tokyo, where the grand tournaments are held, is built on sacred ground. The clay dohyo, the raised ring, is purified with salt before every tournament day. The referees wear costumes that have remained unchanged for 3 centuries. And the wrestlers, the rikishi, are not athletes in the Western sense. They are living monuments to the principle that mass itself can be a form of mastery. Koji Tagawa had been training since he was 9 years old. By the time our story takes place, he had accumulated 14 years, roughly 5,000 days, of daily 4-hour practice sessions at the Tatsunami stable in central Tokyo. He stood 6'2" in bare feet. His thighs measured 38 inches in circumference, larger than the waistline of an average adult man. His grip strength, documented by the Japanese Sumo Association in 1965, registered at 187 pounds of force per hand. He had competed in 23 official grand tournaments, winning 16 of them, and he held a career record of 211 wins against 48 losses. He had sent 4 opponents to hospital with injuries during throws. None of those injuries were intentional. They were simply the byproduct of what happens when 450 pounds of trained muscle applies force to a human body. He had earned the title of Yokozuna, Grand Champion, at the age of 27, becoming one of only 69 men in the entire history of sumo to hold that rank. 69 men, in a sport that has existed for 1,500 years. But here's what matters for our story. Koji Tagawa had never lost. Not in any public setting. Not to any art, any style, any fighter. And by November of 1967, that streak had begun to calcify into something more dangerous than simple confidence. It had become certainty, the unexamined kind, the kind that stops asking questions because it no longer believes questions are necessary. When Tagawa arrived at the Meiji Shrine training complex that Tuesday evening, he was not looking for a challenge. He was there to conduct a charity demonstration for a visiting American sports delegation. He had been told several members of the film industry were present, including someone mentioned offhandedly, a Hong Kong actor who also taught martial arts. Tagawa did not ask for more detail. He didn't need to. He knew what he was. He knew what 450 pounds meant against anything smaller. The complex itself was built in 1958. Concrete floors, high ceilings, the smell of cedar oil and chalk dust, and 30 years of absorbed sweat. The training hall was roughly the size of tennis court. On this evening, folding chairs had been arranged along 2 walls for the visiting delegation. The dohyo in the center had been freshly salted. A photographer from the Yomiuri Shimbun was adjusting his lens in the far corner. 3 of Tagawa's junior wrestlers, ranging from 280 to 340 pounds, were warming up along the east wall. The demonstration was scheduled to begin at 7:30 p.m. It began differently. Bruce Lee arrived at the complex at 7:12 p.m. He was not announced. He had not been formally introduced to the schedule. He came in through the side entrance, accompanying a friend from the American film delegation, a producer named Robert Klaus, who would later direct Enter the Dragon, and he stood near the north wall with his hands in the pockets of a dark green jacket, watching the junior wrestlers warm up with the focused attention of a man who is simultaneously at rest and completely, quietly engaged. He was wearing street clothes, slim-cut trousers, casual shoes. Nothing about his appearance communicated threat. He was, to any casual observer, exactly what he looked like. A slender young man from Hong Kong, 27 years old, with unremarkable hands and a quiet face. Unremarkable hands, unless you looked at the knuckles, the outer edge of Bruce Lee's right hand. The knife-edge portion from the base of the little finger to the wrist was ridged with callous tissue built from years of striking a wooden mukjong training dummy for 3 hours every day. The knuckles themselves had the compressed, flattened look of cartilage that has been repeatedly impacted and rebuilt. His forearms, visible for a moment when he adjusted his jacket sleeve, were striated with muscle fiber visible beneath the skin in a way that suggested not bulk, but density. The physiological signature of someone who trains not for appearance, but for function. He watched the junior wrestlers for approximately 11 minutes without speaking, and then one of the members of the American delegation, a studio executive named Harold Michaels, who had been making conversation with one of Tagawa's trainers through an interpreter, gestured in Bruce's direction and said something. The interpreter translated. The trainer looked across the room. But here's where it changes. The trainer didn't translate back to Tagawa what Michaels had actually said, which was simply that the man in the green jacket also practiced martial arts. Instead, the trainer walked to Tagawa and said something in low Japanese that several witnesses later described as a dismissive gesture toward Bruce's eyes. He used the word karui, which means roughly, lightweight. Tagawa looked across the room for the first time. Bruce Lee was still watching the junior wrestlers. He hadn't moved. He was leaning slightly against the north wall with the easy stillness of a man waiting for a bus. Tagawa smiled. That smile, 3 of the witnesses would later say, was the beginning of the end. What happened next was witnessed by 37 people, and the account that follows is drawn from 7 of their testimonies, 3 of which were recorded in Japanese sports journals between 1968 and 1971, and 4 of which appeared in interviews conducted by martial arts historians in the early 1990s. Tagawa crossed the floor. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He moved with the calm authority of a man who has never had reason to move any other way, and he stopped approximately 6 feet from Bruce Lee, and he looked down, because at 6'2", he could look down at almost everyone, and he spoke. His words, translated by the interpreter present, were approximately these. I'm told you teach fighting. Is this true? Bruce Lee did not answer immediately. He looked at Tagawa for approximately 3 seconds, a pause that several witnesses described as uncomfortable, though not because it seemed nervous, because it seemed the opposite of nervous. He was examining something, assessing, the way a craftsman looks at a piece of material before deciding how to work it. Then he said quietly, I study movement. Tagawa's expression didn't change. He said, and this is the line that Robert Klaus, the film producer, remembered word for word when recounting the story 30 years later. Movement is what I do every day, against real opponents. A beat. 2 people near the folding chairs shifted in their seats. The junior wrestlers had stopped their warm-up. The photographer in the corner lowered his camera. Tagawa's trainer stepped forward and said something to the interpreter. The interpreter hesitated, then translated. The grand champion invites you to demonstrate your technique on the dohyo. Inside Bruce Lee's mind, at this moment, something very specific was happening. He was not calculating the odds. He was not afraid. He was not even particularly surprised. What he was doing, according to the principle he had articulated in his private journals, which were published posthumously and are now held at the University of Washington Special Collections, was reading the energy of the situation. He had a term for it, sensing the center. In Jeet Kune Do philosophy, before any physical exchange, there is an informational exchange. The way a man stands tells you how he will move. The way he issues a challenge tells you what he fears. Tagawa had issued this challenge publicly, loudly. in front of 37 witnesses. He had done it without escalating language, without anger, with total confidence. This told Bruce something important. Tagawa did not fear embarrassment because he had never experienced it, which meant he was entirely unprepared for it. Bruce looked at the dohyo, then back at Tagawa. "All right," he said. "One technique. You choose the condition." The room shifted. Someone, one of the junior wrestlers, actually said something under his breath in Japanese. The word, witnesses agreed, was abunai, dangerous. Tagawa's trainer tried once to intervene. He put a hand on Tagawa's arm and spoke rapidly in Japanese. Tagawa removed the hand without looking at the trainer. The gesture was not unkind. It was simply final. Tagawa stepped onto the dohyo. He faced the center. He turned. He said, "Touch me. Push me. Move me. If you can move me 1 inch, I will acknowledge your technique." 1 inch. The crowd held its breath. Bruce Lee removed his jacket. He folded it carefully. He set it on a folding chair beside the dohyo. He stepped onto the clay. What followed lasted, by the closest estimate of 2 independent witnesses who were timing the charity demonstration schedule, approximately 11 seconds from the moment Bruce stepped onto the clay to the moment Tagawa sat down on the floor. 11 seconds. But inside those 11 seconds, there were individual moments that operated on a different timescale entirely. So let's walk through them. In the first second, Bruce stood at the edge of the dohyo and looked at Tagawa's center mass. Not his face, not his hands, his center, the point between the navel and sternum where the body's weight originates before movement begins. This is foundational to Jeet Kune Do theory. The eyes deceive. They move before the body does, and they move sometimes in the opposite direction of the body's actual intention. The center does not lie. It telegraphs. And in that first second, Bruce read the telegraph. In the second second, Bruce moved forward. Not charging. Not rushing. Moving. The distinction matters enormously. Charging uses momentum as its primary tool. Moving uses position. He covered 4 feet of dohyo clay in a single smooth step that placed him inside Tagawa's natural defensive range, inside the zone where a man of Tagawa's size and training would normally initiate contact. He was too close now for Tagawa to generate a full throwing movement. He had done in 1 step what it would take a sumo wrestler 3 or 4 steps to do, and he had done it before Tagawa's nervous system had fully processed his approach. In the 3rd second, Tagawa reached. This is what sumo wrestlers do at contact. They reach with both hands simultaneously toward the opponent's belt or torso, seeking the grip that enables the throw. It is a movement Tagawa had made, by conservative estimate, approximately 30,000 times in his career. His hands moved with genuine speed for a man his size. And here's the technical truth that makes what happened next legible. Tagawa's reach depended on Bruce being where Bruce appeared to be. Bruce was not where Bruce appeared to be. This is the principle called Mitsuru, the concept in Wing Chun of simultaneous defense and offense, the idea that a block and a strike are not 2 movements but 1, and it appears in Jeet Kune Do as the interception. Bruce did not step back from Tagawa's hands. He did not block them. He slipped laterally exactly 4 inches, a measurement that matters, because 4 inches is enough to move outside the center line of an opponent's force without requiring the defender to transfer their own weight to the rear foot. He remained forward. He remained on his own center line. Tagawa's hands closed on air. In the 4th and 5th seconds, Bruce's left hand made contact with Tagawa's right forearm, not gripping it, not pushing it, but redirecting it, using the kinetic energy of Tagawa's own reach against its direction. The classical Wing Chun technique called bong saw in its applied form. 211 pounds of applied sumo grip strength redirected. And in that same breath, Bruce's right hand found the pressure point at the junction of the trapezius and deltoid muscles on Tagawa's left shoulder, a specific anatomical target, roughly 1 inch below and medial to the acromion process, and applied, by the estimate of several people watching who had training in anatomy, approximately 40 pounds of focused pressure. 40 pounds, not 400. 40. In the 6th through 9th seconds, the crowd went silent. Not quiet, silent. A silence that several witnesses described identically and independently. 3 of them used the phrase, "the air left the room." This is what happened. Tagawa's left knee buckled. Not because he was swept, not because his balance was taken in the sumo sense, with a throw or a push. His knee buckled because the pressure point Bruce accessed, the nerve cluster at the superior lateral aspect of the shoulder girdle, sends a neurological signal that the brain interprets as structural failure, and the body responds to structural failure in the shoulder by involuntarily unloading weight from the ipsilateral leg. This is not a trick. It is anatomy. It is what happens when you apply the right force to the right place with the right precision. Tagawa went to one knee. 450 pounds. One knee. Clay floor. One of the junior wrestlers made a sound. Nobody else did. In the 10th second, Bruce stepped back. This is important. He did not press. He did not complete the technique. He did not drive Tagawa to the floor, which would have been physically possible from that position with the secondary application of downward force to the bowed shoulder. He stepped back, and he released, and he stood at the edge of the dohyo with his hands loose at his sides. The same posture he'd had for the previous 11 minutes against the north wall. Tagawa knelt for one more second. His right hand was on the clay. He was not in pain, not in any simple sense. The pressure was released. The neurological signal had cleared. His body was mechanically fine. He was not fine. In the 11th second, Tagawa sat down fully on the clay and looked at the floor. 37 witnesses. 11 seconds. One lesson that would last them all a lifetime. The room stayed quiet for nearly a full minute. Nobody moved toward the dohyo. Not the trainer. Not the junior wrestlers. Not the journalists. Not Robert Klaus. They all did the same thing, which was stand very still and understand that they had just watched something they did not have an adequate category for. Koji Tagawa stood up. He did it slowly, not because he needed to, but because he was using the time for something. He brushed the salt and clay from his knee. He straightened. He turned to face Bruce Lee, who was standing at the edge of the dohyo exactly where he had stepped back to, exactly as still as before. Tagawa stepped off the dohyo. He walked to the folding chairs. He sat down across from Bruce. He gestured, with a formality that every Japanese witness recognized as something genuine, not a performance of courtesy, but courtesy itself for Bruce to sit. Bruce sat. What they said to each other in the next several minutes, only two people in the room could hear. The interpreter, standing nearby, later provided a partial account. It began with Tagawa asking a single question. He said, "What did you do to my shoulder?" Bruce's answer, translated and reconstructed from the interpreter's account. "Nothing to your shoulder. To your nervous system." The shoulder was the address. The message was about structure. Tagawa was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have been told that pressure points are a myth, that they work only on people who believe in them." Bruce said, "You didn't believe." Another silence. "No," Tagawa said, "I did not." This is not defeat speaking. Understand that. Koji Tagawa was not a man accustomed to defeat, but he was a man accustomed to honesty. That is the particular discipline that 14 years of sumo instills, because sumo does not allow you to blame equipment or weather or a bad day. You go down or you don't. And in the world of that honesty, Tagawa was doing something very specific. He was revising his model of what a body could do. Bruce explained the principle with the same careful precision he brought to every physical demonstration. He talked about economy of motion, the idea that any technique consuming more movement than necessary is already behind, is already losing fractions of seconds it cannot recover. He said something the interpreter rendered as, "Force meeting force is two rivers colliding. Force meeting understanding is a river finding the sea." Tagawa listened. He asked 3 more questions, specific, technical questions about the centerline theory, about the relationship between footwork and hand speed, about how a smaller fighter manages range against a larger one. They were good questions. Expert questions. The questions of a man who had spent his career thinking about bodies in motion at a high level, now suddenly in possession of new data. At the end, Tagawa reached forward and placed his hand, palm down, on the folding chair between them. A gesture without precise English translation, somewhere between a concession and an offering. Then he stood and bowed. Not the formal sumo bow. Something smaller and more specific. The kind of bow that means, "I see you now." Bruce bowed back. one of the junior wrestlers, the largest one, 340 pounds, who had watched the entire exchange from 10 feet away, later said that watching his master bow to a man half his size was the strangest and most clarifying moment of his wrestling career. He used the word satori, an awakening. That wrestler's name was Kentaro Funahashi. He would become relevant again, but that's the next part of the story. Years later, specifically in 1979, 12 years after that Tuesday evening in Tokyo, a journalist writing a retrospective on sumo for the Asahi Shimbun conducted interviews with several people who had been present at the Meiji Shrine Training Complex in November 1967. Koji Tagawa had retired from competition in 1971. He was running a stable of his own by then, training young wrestlers in the Tatsunami tradition. When the journalist reached him for comment, Tagawa said very little. He was not a man who elaborated unnecessarily, but he did say this, that after 1967, he had changed one aspect of his training curriculum. He had added a component, not sumo specific, not drawn from any Japanese tradition, that he called reading the center. He taught his wrestlers that before contact, before movement, before anything, there was information, and the information was more important than the weight. He never explained where the concept came from. He never mentioned Bruce Lee's name in any public context. But every wrestler who trained under him after 1967 carried that principle forward. Some of them went on to become coaches themselves. Their wrestlers now compete in grand tournaments carrying a habit of perception, a way of reading an opponent's center before engagement, that traces directly to 11 seconds on a clay floor in November 1967. Kentaro Funahashi, the 340-pound junior wrestler who witnessed everything, eventually retired from competition and became a trainer. He tells the story openly. He has told it in 3 documented interviews and in the introduction to a training manual he published in 2003. He says that watching Tagawa kneel on the clay was the first time he understood that his sport had a ceiling, and that Bruce Lee had shown him the ceiling by touching it. He says Tagawa never spoke of the encounter, not once, not to his wrestlers, not to the press, not to his family, as far as Funahashi knew. Not because he was ashamed, because some things, Funahashi explained, exist in a register beyond language. To talk about them is to make them smaller than they are. Tagawa had encountered something on that dohyo that no vocabulary in his tradition could hold. And so he held it silently instead. He held it in his body, and he taught it through his hands, and it moved forward through time in people who never knew his name. Now return to the image from the beginning. That gymnasium, those fluorescent lights, a 450-pound yokozuna standing at the center of the dohyo, and a man half his weight standing 8 feet away with his hands loose at his sides. The question the audience couldn't answer was, what is the smaller man going to do? The answer now is visible. He was going to do nothing except what was necessary. One center, one moment, one lesson that crossed every boundary of size and style and language and traveled forward through 40 years to reach you here, now, in this telling. One man, one technique, one truth that physics and anatomy and 14 centuries of martial philosophy all agree on. Force is not the point. Understanding is the point. And Koji Tagawa never spoke about that evening. Not publicly. Not once. Which raises a question that has quietly followed this story for decades. If Tagawa never told anyone what Bruce said to him in those private minutes on the folding chairs, and if the interpreter only caught fragments, what exactly did Bruce Lee say that changed everything? There is one account, one witness who claims to have been close enough to hear the full exchange. And what that witness says Bruce said, those specific words, that is a story for another time. Endo.